Tolly with Trust in the Truth. And I am coming to you. Hold on a second. Okay. About tonight's topic, Uncle Tom's Revenge, exposing the real sellouts. You know, one thing that many of us black conservatives get, and it's basically from people that are unknowledgeable, is we'll get all kinds of nasty names. We'll be called sellouts, Uncle Toms. I even had a guy that I grew up with call me a coon. The sad thing about it is when he did it, he didn't tell me why. He didn't base it on anything other than a post that I made. He never said, Sam, why did you think this way? Sam, why are you doing this? Sam, let me show you where you're wrong. You know, I would have a whole lot more respect for people if they would just come out and communicate with us. You know, just say what's on their mind. You know, instead of going with this robotic mentality that you're not a Democrat, you're a coon, you're an Uncle Tom, you're a sellout. Is that really the case? Are black conservatives sellouts, particularly black Christian conservatives? Or is it that we have taken the time and investigated the evidence and have looked at the history and have looked at what's going on and the solutions that have been presented and come to the conclusion that we've been sold a bill of goods? Now, the question is this, or should I say a big question is this. If we believe that we're right, why should we go with along with what they're saying? Why can't we hold them accountable? Okay, show us where we're wrong. Prove your point to us. We're willing to prove our points to them. I've had people tell me all kinds of stuff. I had a guy tell me once where when he was concerned or think that I was going off the deep end, being a conservative, I said, look, I can prove A, B, C, and D to you about the different parties and the racial histories and all this stuff. And the guy told me, don't waste your time. And, you know, that's one of the things that have stuck with me over the years because my attitude is this: if I'm wrong, show me where I'm wrong so I can get right. I hate being wrong. And I definitely am not a person that want to disseminate bad information. But if I'm right, then I'm right. Or at the least you can do is you can examine what I have to say and people like me and test the evidence. That's all we ask. That's what we did. But we're talking about those selves. I need to go back in history. I need to talk first and foremost about Uncle Tom. Because many people, many black people have no idea who Uncle Tom was. All they know is when they hear Uncle Tom or they hear called Uncle Tom, they get like this Pavlov's dog reaction. There was this, I think it was a Russian scientist who made an experiment that he had a dog and that he would ring a bell and the dog would come in and give the dog something to eat. And so he kept ringing the bell and the dog's mouth was salivate because he knew he was going to get this morsel and get him something to eat. So it got to the point where he didn't have to give him anything to eat to get him salivating. He just rang the bell. The dog was conditioned by that ring to just go wherever, you know, just think he's going to get something. So he salivated. And I think for the most part, many blacks in America are conditioned when they hear the name Uncle Tom to get angry, to be insulted, to want to fight, to want to just do whatever, you know, because they're insulted. They call it Uncle Tom and they don't even know why. Well, let's talk about Uncle Tom. Let's talk about the writer of Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom's Cabin is the book that everybody references. And let me show you a picture of the lady who wrote it. Hold on one second while I try to put this together. Here is a picture of Harriet Beecher Stowe. She is the lady that wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. What many people don't know, even those who understand Uncle Tom, don't realize that this woman was a writer for like 50 years. She wrote over 30 books. And she was asked, I believe, to do some columns in a publication that she thought would only be a few chapters, but it ended up being like 40. And it was based on the premise of wanting to let people know what slavery was like in the deep South. Well, let's get back in line here. Bring me back. The thing about it was slavery was a Southern institution that was mostly in the Southern states. And many people in the Northern states were not familiar about the brutality, the evil, the wickedness of it all. Many Americans went along with the mantra that, oh, well, these are just unfortunate people who can't take care of themselves anyway, so they might as well be in involuntary servitude. But when Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, and I believe it was around 1853, it exposed the horrors of slavery. It exposed people being raped and beaten and murdered, that children being taken away from their parents, sold off, wives being taken away from their husband, men being beaten by the lash. It just showed the brutality and the honest horror of the whole thing. Well, the South hated that. They didn't want that kind of information coming out. Matter of fact, it was banned in many places because they did not want the overall American people to understand exactly what was going on. Now, all slave masters weren't evil. Well, slavery was the evil institution. What I mean by they weren't evil was all of them didn't beat their slaves and treat them like dogs, but many of them did. And whether you treat a person like a dog or you treat them like a servant, if that person doesn't have the freedom to make the decisions for their own life, then that person is not being respected as an equal human being. So, I find it interesting that slavery, they were banning her book in the South, just like, for example, they were banning stories about Hunter's laptop a couple of years ago, where that's not something we can relate to in this season of time. When the election of 2020 was going on, and that information came out in 2019, well, they banned that. They made it so the average citizen couldn't get that information. You had to dig to get that information. And I read a statistic recently where they were saying that 70% of Americans believe that if the laptop information that came out, well, the votes might have went differently. And for those of you who, just like those back in the 1850s, knew nothing about slavery, for those of you who didn't know anything about Hunter's laptop, let me just make a little short statement here. Hunter Biden had a laptop. I think he had a couple, in fact. But, he was notorious. He lived a notorious life at that time. I mean, he had womanizing, prostitutes. He was into all kinds of drugs. He was doing all kinds of stuff. So anyway, he had a laptop that broke for whatever reason. He took it to this laptop repair shop to get it fixed. Well, the man fixed his laptop. And then he tried to contact Biden to come and get it. He never did. And the man had I guess his business stated that after X amount of days or months or whatever, the property that isn't claimed is mine. So he tried unsuccessfully to get Hunter Biden, to get his laptop. Biden didn't do it. So he took possession of the laptop. as his. And he reviewed the laptop. And then he found all kinds of emails and stuff in the laptop about deals between communist China and the Biden family and how they were getting millions of dollars. And then 10% of all the money they got would go to the big guy. And this guy that used to work with Biden named Babaluski said the big guy is Joe. Now, all these deals took place when Joe was vice president under Obama. So the American people, their vice president had made a side deal with communist China and was getting money from them while being the vice president, according to the information we allegedly have from this laptop. And then there was also this thing that was going around when Joe was vice president about Hunter doing business and getting, I don't know, like $50,000 a month or whatever from the Ukraine. And then they were starting to investigate the Ukraine. And then during that investigation, when there was a prosecutor in the Ukraine investigating corruption, which would involve Hunter, amongst other people, allegedly. And what happened was this investigator, I guess he was getting too close or whatever. Now, Joe went to Ukraine on behalf of the American government, my understanding was, and there was a video where Joe just said, we need this corrupt prosecutor fired, or you're not going to get the money. And then the guy said then something about we weren't going to fire him, and Joe said, well, I'm getting on a plane. And he said, son of a gun, or something like that. He was fired. So, and I also heard a story, and I don't know if this part was on the laptop or not, about Hunter getting millions of dollars or $1 million from the wife of Amir in Russia. And that begs the question about our news cycle or our news media when they spent 3 years saying that Trump was in bed with Russia, but says nothing about this. But I'm just saying, I'm bringing it all out to say that we here in the 21st century, we're being censored too from information, just like those folks at the time of Uncle Tom's Cabin were being censored. Now, what made Uncle Tom's Cabin, like I said, so explosive was slaves were not allowed to read or write. You know, if you can keep a man ignorant, you can keep him under control. Just like I think these days we have these policies where they're legalizing marijuana, and I think in Oregon they're legalizing all drugs. And I say that if you can keep people anesthetized, you can keep them under control. I mean, if a person is not functioning with a clear mental process, you can slip all kinds of stuff by them. And if you got them thinking that if I can get high and it's okay, why worry about anything? So anyway, getting back to Harriet Beecher Stowe and Uncle Tom. But Uncle Tom learned how to read. This little girl taught him how to read, and she taught him how to read the Bible. Uncle Tom became a believer in Jesus Christ, and he loved the Lord and he loved people. And now we have this vision. They've made this vision of Uncle Tom as some shiftless, no account, evil man that's not about anything. But Uncle Tom in Harriet Beecher Stowe's book was an honorable man. He was a good man. In fact, he was an analogy or analogous to the suffering servant of Jesus Christ. It got to the point where some people escaped from the plantation to Canada. Uncle Tom knew it, and he knew where they went, but he refused to tell on them. He was beaten to death by his master because Uncle Tom was not really what they want to call today an Uncle Tom. And when I was in junior high school, I refused to read Uncle Tom because my mindset was just like many people today. I had that Pavlov's dog syndrome. I believe it was the seventh grade. Uncle Tom's Cabin was one of the books we were supposed to read. I ain't reading that. I ain't reading that. I said, I want to read the autobiography of Malcolm X instead. Okay. My teacher, Mrs. Bishop, she was an understanding woman. I guess she just wanted to give me a grade. She said, fine. It took me to get into my, I believe, 40s or maybe even 50s before I read Uncle Tom's Cabin. And when I read it, I understood how powerful and how dangerous it was, because that book not only exposed the evil of slavery, it also taught about the Bible and Jesus Christ and the love of God. And that was a dangerous combination. And by the way, just so we're not being mistaken about anything, the party of slavery, the party that was promoting the evil of slavery and wanted us not to know, or the public at that time, to read Uncle Tom's Cabin, was the Democrat Party. So they hated Uncle Tom's Cabin. They hated Harriet Beecher Stowe because of what it did. And that book created such a force that some say that it was a contributing factor to the Civil War. So never underestimate the power of words. Words are powerful, and they are very, very dangerous. They are very deadly. Uncle Tom was not an Uncle Tom. He was a great person. But why did people destroy him? Why did people want to destroy him? It wasn't just slavery in the 1800s, around the time Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote this book, that people wanted to get rid of Uncle Tom. In the 1900s, in the 20th century, there was a very strong effort to get rid of Uncle Tom. An effort that many of us have no idea actually took place. I'm going to share some of that with you right now. There was a man named Manny Johnson that wrote a book. This book right here. The book is called Color, Communism, and Common Sense. He wrote this book in 1958. Manny Johnson was a black man who was a communist. Now, he went into communist as a young man. Communism. The problem with his efforts to embrace communism was he was raised up a Christian. So he got filled up with way more Christianity in him before he let the communism start affecting him. And eventually it got to the point where he couldn't reconcile the two. Unlike many of my Democrat friends today, they seem to be able to reconcile many anti-biblical positions while still claiming to be a Christian. And I'm hoping they'll get a problem with that. But I want to read a couple of points that Manny Johnson made in Color, Communism, and Common Sense while we're talking about the real sellouts. In chapter 2 of this book, at the bottom paragraph, it states, a large number of Negro ministers are all for the communists. Some are prominent and influential. Others are. They in common believe that beating the racial drum is a shortcut to prominence, money, and the realization of personal ambitions, even if the Negro masses are left prostrated and bleeding, expendables in the mad scramble for power. Doesn't that sound like some people you know of today? I can think of at least two off the hand, but there's many more. Well, actually, even three. Excuse me, we got newly reelected Senator Warnock for one. But these preachers, like he said, they in common believe that beating the racial drums, all these fellows do that, is a shortcut to prominence, money, and the realization of poor personal ambitions, even if the Negro masses are left prostrate and bleeding, expendable in the mad scramble for power. I've seen Jesse, I've seen Al, I've seen a bunch of these folks for years talking about how they're out there helping Black people. And I don't see the Black race in America as a whole progressing from these preachers. Let's see. Here's another point Mr. Manny made. This is in what chapter? It's a very small book. It's an easy book to get. You can get it on Amazon. I think you can even get a copy online free. You know, like I said, Manning Johnson, Color, Communism, and Common Sense. But it's worth having a hardcover copy. And you get it on Audible. But this book is worth having. It's well worth reading, because we're talking about a man that was a communist back in the 40s and 50s, or 50s at least. And we're talking about what's going on now, some more than 50 years later, 60, 65 years later. On chapter 4, it says ban of red integration. So he's talking about how the Communist Party wanted to use Black people to help destroy America. Okay, significant it is to note that the Reds, when we say Reds, you're talking about the communists, and the so-called progressives never spend money on projects to help the Negroes unless these projects pay off in race conflict and animosity. That begs the question. You know, I remember every election cycle, Democrats are always talking about how they care so much about Black people. Democrats, the party of slavery, remember? They're always talking about what they're going to do for Black people. And I always see Black people in the same position they were in before they voted for them same Democrats all over again. I remember this joker, and I call him a joker, this, what is his name, called Charlemagne the God or whatever. Well, he's talking about, well, I mean, when Joe Biden sit over there and told him, well, if you don't know the difference between me and Trump, you ain't Black. And then later on, this guy's talking about, well, you know, they gotta pick a Black woman to run with him. And so you got him and these other Black people talking about they got to get a Black woman. So they get Kamala, who was what? Her mother was Indian, you know, from India, and her father was from the Caribbean or something. So neither one of them were Black Americans, but that's besides the point. I guess she fit the pigment requirement. So they got people hung up on this pigment requirement, and what do we get for this? People are so hung up on this, just like this Ketanji Brown, this new Supreme Court woman. Oh, excuse me. I don't know if she's a woman or not, because she don't know what a woman is. So pigmentation is the outer look of whatever this person is. I'm more interested in what's between this person's ears, what this person's record is, what this person is going to do, what this person has done. You know, they got Black folks, like I said, like Pavlov's dog, going for all this stupid stuff and never accomplishing nothing. And then, as sure as my name is Samuel Tolley, they'll be drumming that stuff up again. They'll be getting the Spike Lees and the Samuel L. Jacksons and all the Hollywood folks, like Spike talking about, well, old Uncle Joe, the Oprahs, and all these folks. And we're supposed to listen to them like what they say has significance. Man. Let me show you a picture of Manny Johnson with a quote that he gave. I'm gonna read a paragraph before this quote that he gives you about Uncle Tom. Let's take Mr. Johnson here. Here's Manny Johnson. Now, let me read the quote before that one. Except for a brief period during the later 1930s, the Reds called those persons Uncle Toms, who sought solutions of the race problem through the medium of education, patience, understanding, and discussions which would lead to mutual agreement. Since any program leading to a peaceful solution of the race problem automatically excludes and dooms the Red efforts among Negroes, it goes without saying that the Reds are going to oppose it. The chief targets are the responsible advocates of such a program. They must be discredited and isolated from the masses. So, in addition to the tags of enemy of the race, tools of the white ruling class, traitor to the race, the Reds have added the operum of Uncle Tom. He's saying right there that it was the communists that fostered this notion that Uncle Tom and Black Americans was what we think of it today. He wrote this in 1958, but this was going on since like the 30s. And most Black folks in America have no idea of what I just said. He goes on and says, which is the quote I have on the picture, in their usual diabolically clever way, the Reds, communists, that is like the Marxists, those women from BLM took the name of a fine, sincere, and beloved character made famous in the greatest indictment of chattel slavery and transformed him into a dirty, low, sneaky, treacherous, groveling, sniveling coward. This the Reds did in order to make the name Uncle Tom the symbol of social, economic, and political leprosy. I'll go a little bit further. Today, the name Uncle Tom among Negroes ranked with the term McCarthyism, generally turning many ministers into moral cowards, many politicians into scared jackrabbits, and many other leaders in hypocrites. There you have it. Uncle Tom from Manny Johnson is a handle the communists put on Black people that won't stand up for the race wars, the race violence, won't stand up for the incitement of anger. You know, when we had those riots in 2000, the Summer of Love, those folks weren't considered Uncle Toms. But if you were trying to make opportunity zones or you were trying to do something that was going to help Black people, you're Uncle Tom. So black people don't think like they say we're supposed to think. Uncle Toms. They destroyed a perfectly great individual because they were able to, due to our ignorance of real history and knowledge of who Uncle Tom was. These are the real sellouts. I'll talk a little bit more. I made a few notes on the real sellouts I want to share with you. Okay. The real sellouts masquerade as saviors. They gain cover by their vast wealth and supposed charitable deeds. They garner envy and admiration from stories of humble beginnings turned to their newfound lifestyles of opulence. They've become the rich and the famous. Lights, cameras, and microphones follow their every step. They search for their thoughts on the latest world events. And they also wonder what they eat for breakfast. It seems like everything they touch turns to gold. But for us, it's just fool's gold. No one dares criticize them because they can always point to their deeds and say, "What have you done?" And we say what? Nothing. They say, "Look at me." Yes, they build schools equipped with the latest innovations and prepare a table for the talented 10. However, at the same time, their actions tighten the noose around the necks of the maligned masses. The few fortunate enough to partake of their table are sacrificed enough. Therefore, to expect them to speak out beyond that is far and above beyond the call of duty. They will forcefully speak out against poverty, unemployment, poor failing schools, and the like, just as long as they are not required to offer or induce real solutions. Never will they say anything against the teachers' union. They are not ignorant of the fact that the teachers' union controls the money, which controls the teachers and set the educational requirements or the lack thereof. They are more than willing to sacrifice the children of others to inadequate schools, but never their own. While they share the mantra of the mantra of more money for the children, they understand that the money never filters down to them. They also understand that school vouchers would give parents the power to seek a better education for their children instead of surrendering them to the teachers' union, which values the educators above those in need of an education. So speak up they will, but sacrifice their own, that's out of the question. The real sellouts make sure that their children gain the best education possible, which will allow them to take over their place one day, thereby assuming the nobleman position they hold now. And our children are expected to take our place of serfdom. The real sellouts talk about how standards need to be lowered in order for the minorities to compete, when they actually know that lowering standards will only contribute to the perpetual poverty that has been embedded in our blind culture. The real sellouts agree with demeaning slogans like voter ID is racist. They know it's a lie and a psychological tool designed to instill inferiority in us. But it is also a tool designed to keep them paid. As long as people are willing to listen to their nonsense, people are willing to pay them to spout it. Since their money is their God, our progress isn't and never will be. which begs the point. Why should we continue listening to these people? Black folks have not significantly improved in the past 57 years. I'm talking about since LBJ's Great Society. And these people are selling the same baseless, useless, unfulfilling talking points. They always offer a lot of talk, sprinkled with worthless solutions. They point to white Republicans as the enemy and black folks who quit listening to the lies as sellouts, but refuse to see that the Democrat savior is the real enemy, and so are those blacks who herd and corral the masses into the Democrat plantation. See, those are the real sellouts. See, the real sellouts, they don't talk about the border and millions of illegals coming across the border. I think I heard today that Joe Biden was talking about all these folks, new Americans. Think about this. You got a family, you got a house, you work a job, you bring the money home, you pay your bills, you buy food for your family, you buy clothing, whatever, you take care of your family. Now, if all of a sudden you got 20 more people showing up in your house that expect you to take care of them, that's going to stretch your money to an excruciating amount of pain. You're not going to be able to provide for your original children the things that you were going to do. Now you got to squeeze it out amongst all these strangers. Well, look at the country as your house. All these millions of folks coming here, they ain't gonna, somebody's got to pay for this stuff. That somebody is you. That somebody is a taxpayer. All these bleeding heart liberals that say, oh, what about the children? These people just want a place to stay. They just want to get what's better for their kids. Look, folks, that's a lie. I'm not saying it's a lie that these people don't want these things. The lie is these politicians feeding you this crap. How many of them will open their doors and let these folks in their house? None. And the fact of it is, these politicians aren't working a job like you and me. We're paying them. And we're paying them to represent us, not those folks that come across the border. These people get their salary, they get stipends, they get free stuff all over the place, and they don't have to be subject to Obamacare. But they expect us to absorb folks that don't belong here. Now, I think I also heard Biden talking about giving them free health care. Well, nothing is free. Anybody tell you it's free is a lie. It's going to cost us more money, and it's going to reduce our access to public health. Why? Why would they do that? Why? It makes no sense. Oh, it makes plenty of sense. Because if you have the power, you're going to get the money. Money always follows power. So if you have the power, you don't have to worry about the money. And the power these Democrats are looking for is the vote. If they can get more people to be dependent on that big, gigantic government mammary gland, and they'll say, golly, these people, they open the door, they let us in, they're taking care of us. We're going to vote for them. Then they stay emboldened. They stay in power. And we, who are not living with them and their gated communities and their private security and all that stuff, we have to tolerate the nonsense. The city of Los Angeles just elected a new mayor. And I heard for her inauguration, she cleared out all this area around City Hall. She didn't want folks to see that mess. Now, she claims She's going to do something about the homeless. We'll see. I hope so. Garcetti was going to do something about the homeless. Last time I went to LA, you go about 3 miles west of downtown, and you're in a third world. Folks are living in sidewalks on cardboard and tents and fecal matter in the street, and you have you got drug addicts and you got crazy people. I mean, it's just you wouldn't even want to walk down the street. Matter of fact, the businesses in that area, the only thing that they can do is come in and out of their driveways, because the sidewalks surrounding their business are occupied with residents of the street. And I'm sure that many of those businesses would leave if they could, but they're trapped here. Now, if American citizens are living on the streets of Los Angeles, and I think I read yesterday there was over 40,000, why on earth will we be allowing a bunch of illegals to come to this country when we can't even get Americans off the street? It makes no sense. It makes none if you really care about the American people. So you tell me who's the real sellouts. Not people that are trying to make opportunities on. And by the way, when Trump was president, he made opportunity zones available in minority communities, Black communities, Hispanic communities, incentives for businesses to open in those communities and get massive tax breaks. You hear about that anymore? That's when Trump was president. When Trump was president, we had before this COVID nonsense, we had the highest employment in our history, the lowest Black unemployment, the lowest unemployment for women, the lowest unemployment for minorities, period. People were making money, and we didn't have any inflation. But we were told that if you vote for Trump, you ain't Black. We were told that Trump was evil. We were told that if you wore a MAGA hat, you're crazy, and you're what they call Larry Elder, the black face of white supremacy. You tell me who's a sellout. And like I said, also, with all these millions of people crossing the border, they drive down wages. When you got folks that's used to not making any money across the border that can do a trade that will cost a lot more money in the United States, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican business, if you can get lower employment, you're going to shoot it, because your highest cost is manpower or woman power or woke power or he, she, whatever the heck you want to call these folks these days. So it drives down wages. Not only does it drive down wages, but what about the Black folks, the Hispanic folks that live here, that are United States citizens that want a job? Now we have to compete against those illegals. Why? Why should we be competing against millions of illegals? You tell me who's the real sellout. The real sellout is these so-called celebrities and athletes and all these folks that get up there, and these commentators that talk all this crap. And actually all they're doing is like somebody riding on a cart with a donkey in front of it with a carrot. And the Black person or Black masses are the donkeys, and that carrot is this money and this better lifestyle that's being promised that you ain't gonna never catch up with. Following these people, because they offer these same solutions and stuff. Back in 1965, when LBJ and his Great Society kicked in, and Senator Moynihan made the warning that 25% of Black families only have a single parent, and that was a catastrophe. Now it's almost 75%. But these people, all these talking heads and celebrities and all these rich and famous folks, they don't talk about that stuff. They don't talk about that. They don't talk about our girls having to share facilities with boys because of this craziness. They don't talk about emasculating our boys and telling them they could be girls when the black family is fragmented enough. You never hear them talk about stuff like that. The only people that are standing up for the black family, by and large, are conservative, mostly conservative Christians. You'll find conservative Christian men and women standing up for the black family, but they're called sellouts. Excuse me. They're called us sellouts. And we're standing up for the things of God. We're standing up for the family. We're standing up for righteousness and right living. But our brethren who have bought into the Pavlov dog syndrome of the Democrat Party, they can't see it, or they don't want to see it, or they refuse to see it, or whatever. But you would think that after so many years of the same lies and like it's like living on a treadmill. I mean, gonna overcome, and we ain't never overcoming nothing. You would think they'd be sick of it. Well, as black Christian conservatives, we are sick of it. And we ain't standing for it no more. And even if you guys refuse to move, we're moving. And we're praying that your children will one day, look up and say, what the heck were they thinking about? They're not making no sense to me. I'm not going that direction. I'm not going to be dependent on the government to make my needs met. I'm going to depend on God and myself. Oh, let's see here. One last thing. Well, I could do a lot of stuff. I could be talking about the defund the police, the sellout, all those rich folks. I remember some congresswoman or something who who spent money for private security, talk about defund the police. And when they were talking that defund the police nonsense, I knew as soon as they said that it was the black community that was going to suffer the most. Why? Because all these rich folks, they got their gated communities or they got their private security. But the minority community who's already been suffering from a higher crime rate, the police are going to be less inclined to want to do anything. Hell, if you're going to prosecute or persecute me, I'm not getting involved in that. And what happened? We've had some of the highest rates of homicides in the country since that mess. And many of those Marxists, those communists, requested that. Sound like Mr. Manning Johnson knew what was going on. Way back in 1958, he understood it. He understood that defunding the police was crazy. So, what are we going to do, folks? And I didn't even talk about abortion. I'll save killing our prodigy off again for another time. But the real sellouts are those folks that keep inviting us to do the same thing over and over again that they know full well isn't going to change nothing. See, getting back to schools for a second, like I said, if we had school vouchers, they're not doing us a favor giving us school vouchers. We pay the taxes. I'll use this analogy. I've used this analogy before. I'll use it again. When you feed your family, you're going to go buy them some meat. And if you go to a store and they sell you bad meat, you're not going back to that store. But we don't have a government that makes you go to that store yet. We may one day. You're going to go find a store that's going to give you the meat that you want so you can take it home to your family. But we let the government insist on telling us where our kids can get miseducated. I didn't say that wrong. I said miseducated. Talk all this wokeism and all this nonsense that's not going to help them achieve anything. Where if you had school vouchers, where if your tax money followed the child instead of following the school, then you could take your child to the school that you determine is best for your child and help your child get to where you want your child to go in the future. Now, those schools is going to have a choice. It's going to either get itself up to snuff or it's going to die out, just like that bad meat store. And that ain't my problem. My problem is my child. But as long as you let the government dictate where your child can go and don't give the parent the control, then you're going to end up like this. And all those rich politicians, and I say they're rich because, well, shoot, he bought a $15 million house. I think he got out of his job of $400,000 a year. He was only in there for what, 8 years? Anyway, these rich politicians, they put their kids in private school. Their kids won't suffer. Like I said, their kids are going to be the noblemen, and they insist we put ours in that failing public school. And my Democrat brother friends, they do not insist on doing what's best for their kids. And you call me a sellout? That's crazy. You guys need to start doing what's best for your kids. And then what's best for your kids is to get vouchers. Then you can decide to keep them in that crappy school if you want, or you can put them in a better school or homeschool. And you're better off these days because they're liable to tell you or tell your son that he's a girl, and he might come home one day and tell you, Daddy, I want a vagina. And you wonder, where the hell did that come from? Or your 13-year-old girl come home one day and talk about she wants to get her, puberty blockers going. How would you like that? It's time to wake up, people. It's time to wake up. I don't give a rat's but what political party is what. I believe in doing what's right, what's moral, what's lining with the things of God. And unfortunately, this Democratic Party is lining up many times for the thing that is ungodly. And they perpetuate this sellout mentality to Black people, and Black people eat this nonsense to the point where they don't even think anymore. It's just automatic. The closest I've gotten to some Black people thinking that have been in the lifelong Democrats is they'll tell me, I'm not a Democrat, I'm an independent, but they still vote Democrat. I guess that's a little progress. It has to get cycled through your brain before you can make a change. And I'm not telling people you need to be a Republican. I'm telling you need to stop fostering or giving your vote and your power to people that foster your destruction. That's what you should do. Quit doing it. You got to learn how to think. This is a new day, people. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And it's not going to get better. Listening to the same people telling the same lies, or new people telling the same lies. Well, anyway, let me close with this. I hope you realize that Uncle Tom is not the bad guy. And if you've never read Uncle Tom's Cabin, I encourage you to do it. It's not an easy read for the 21st century mind, particularly if you're one of these folks that haven't been educated well, because this could be difficult. But you can get the book on Audible and let them read it to you. But it's well worth it. And if you don't know what Pavlov's dog is, look that up too. That's well worth it. At any rate, start thinking. Because until you start thinking on your own, nothing's going to change. As I like to always say, remember this: either your theology is going to govern your politics, or your politics is going to govern your theology. If you're a Christian, you better get your theology to govern your politics. That means God comes first. What he says comes first. And the way we live our life is through him and not through some political party. Any political party wants you to do anything that is antithetical to the word of God. Don't do it. Until next time, this is Sam Tolley, and I'm out.